Hey guys, this is Srini and you're watching basic Python tutorials on my channel Python for Microscopists on YouTube. And again, these lectures are intended for beginning coders, students, researchers, or anyone who would like to get into image processing using Python. So until now, we actually talked about lists, different data types. We even talked about numpy arrays. We'll talk about numpy arrays again later on. But anytime you have certain tasks that you would like to repeat over and over, then we need to put them in what we call loops. A loop actually does a task in a repeated fashion. So there are various types of loops. In fact, in the previous tutorial, we have already looked at a for loop. Just to remind everyone, we defined a list, and a list can be something like this, for example. And we defined a list, and we realized that if we want to do some math on a list, not a numpy array, but an actual Python list, we cannot just do a multiplied by 2 because it actually concatenates the list and it doesn't do the multiplication. So we realized, okay, one way to do that is we can say for i in a, let's print I multiplied by lowercase I multiplied by 2. So if we execute that, here you can see that each element in the list is multiplied by 2. So for is a loop in this example. So in Python, there are two primary types of loops. One is a while loop, and it repeats a statement or a bunch of statements while a given statement is true. Okay, so that's a while loop. A for loop executes statements multiple times, especially if you have lists or strings. A third type of loop is called a nested loop, which is nothing but a while or a for loop where you have one inside the other. If you have a while loop inside a while, a for inside a for, or a for loop inside a while loop. So you can have any of these. These are called just a nested loop. A nested loop is nothing but just a simple execution of a while loop or a for loop. So let's go ahead and look at a few of these, like a couple of examples, starting with while loop. So I'll try to stick with this Python console on the right hand side so it's easier for us to focus. Now, one thing, in fact, let me go back up. Well, let's do while loop, and let's actually count numbers from 0 to 10 incrementally, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay, without typing all of these numbers. So we can just start by saying, okay, my count equals to 0. So I'm kind of initializing my count. And at this point, the value of count is 0. Now I'm going to start a while loop, and I'm going to say while count is less than 10. Okay, so while count is less than 10, what do we want to do? And anytime you have a loop, you end it with a colon, while or a for. Yeah. So while count is less than 10, now we need to say what do we want to do while the count is less than 10. So let's print out that the count is, okay, so it prints the count is, and it prints count. So when we execute this statement, initially count is 0 and it is less than 10. So it's going to print the count is 0. Okay, the count is 0. Now what? Let's increase the count by 1. So the way we do that in Python is count equals count plus 1. Again, if you look at this from a mathematical equation point of view, this doesn't make any sense. Count cannot be equal to count plus 1. Yeah. What this statement does here is initially our count is 0, so the new count is going to be the previous count plus 1. So this is nothing but it's incrementing this count by 1 every time the while loop executes. So if I run this, hopefully this makes sense. The count is 0 and then it's increased by 1. So now the new count value is 1. So this initial count equals to 0 is outside the while loop. If I put it inside, then the count is 0 every time. Yeah. So it's outside the loop, just to give a starting number, starting value. Once it's 0, now we are increasing it by 1. And also one other thing to notice is anything that comes under while, or all the code that belongs inside this loop, needs to be indented. Okay, so it's not lined up with while anymore. Let me explain that by copying the code onto the text editor, because this is again very important. So count equals to 0, and while, let's say count is less than 10. Okay, while count is less than 10. Now if I hit return, well, I have to put the colon there. When I hit return, you see it automatically includes the tab. Now I can actually type print or something. Okay, the same thing happens even for a loop. So let's say for I in a or something, when I return, it actually includes the tab, and everything that falls inside this loop is tabbed. And when you go back outside of the tab, then you're back into the main code. So let's do one other example before we move on to the for loop. And I need to warn you guys, when you do while loop, you can easily get into this infinite loop if you are not careful. So if we say count equal to 0, okay, just like before. Now if you say while count is equal to 0, okay, and print, okay, so when I execute this, this goes into an infinite loop. It's still printing, it's still printing, it's still printing. The reason is when we said, let me go ahead and stop it. When we said while, if I go back, it's all the way in the top, on the top somewhere, you know. When I typed count equals 0, while count equals to 0, do something. The count is always equals to 0, so it's going to do that forever. So this is one place where you need to be a bit careful. Now let's actually come back to the text side of it, and then try to convert centigrade into Fahrenheit. And the equation is, let me go ahead and comment this part. F equals 9/5 times C plus 32. Okay, so this is the equation we need to do, and let's iterate this over multiple values of C. So let's start by initializing our C. What is my first value of C? Let's start with -40, because I know at -40 degrees the centigrade and Fahrenheit scales actually match. So my F should be -40. This is a sanity check. Now let's do, I mean, normally you would type your equation, but I want to do that while increasing the centigrade. So first, let's just do while C is less than, let's say 45. That means it goes from -40 to 40. Or I could have said C is less than or equal to 40. Okay, so while C is less than or equal to 40, what do I want to do? I want to calculate F, which is equal to 9 divided by 5 multiplied by C plus 32. In case you wonder how the math is done, if it is doing C plus 32 or 9 divided by 5 times C plus 32, if you are not sure, go ahead and add the extra brackets to provide additional clarity. Normally multiplication is higher priority than addition, so it would have actually done this correctly, but again, a sanity check. And if you want everything to be in float, you can just put like dots right next to it. Okay, so this calculates F. Now let's go ahead and print out. Print, I want to print both C and F at the same time. Okay, and if I do this, then it just does it for one value, -40. Let's go ahead and execute this, and well, it's actually in the infinite loop again, because C is less than or equal to 40 all the time. You see, now I got into another infinite loop there. I need to increment my C. So C equals C plus, remember in the previous example we have incremented the value by 1. We did c equal, whatever that value was equals to, count equals count plus 1 or something. Now let's just do c equals c plus, let's go by steps of 5. Okay, c equals c plus 5. And now let's run this and see one more time what happens. So there you go. We got a table that goes from -40 to +40, and -40 centigrade equals -40 Fahrenheit. So I know at least for that value it worked fine. So that's good. And by the way, c equals c plus 5 can also be written as c plus equal to 5. This is same as c equals c plus 5. It's up to you, however you would like to write this code. So this is the while loop, and I guess that gave you a good idea of how the while works. It comes down to the one fact that while some statement is true, it's going to do a whole bunch of stuff that's inside this loop. Now, on the other hand, a for loop has the ability to iterate over any sequence. The sequence can be an array, it can be a list, it can be a string. So a good way of, again, let's go back to the console because it's easier. So a good way to demonstrate this is, let's just say for letter in, let's give a text. Where am I typing? Let's go ahead and type here. For letter in I love Python, okay, colon. So I defined a variable called letter in this case. For letter in I love Python, what do we want to do for letter? So let's actually do print. Let's just say the current letter is, and then let's print letter. Okay. So now if we execute this, you should see that it went through each and every letter. So for letter in I love Python. So letter is a variable that goes through every space or every character, including the spaces within this line. And again, don't confuse this letter with, I could have replaced this with I. So let's actually go ahead and do that. So instead of letter, I would just say for I, it doesn't matter. We just define a variable, and you need to use the same variable. So let me copy this so I don't have to type it. And now instead of letter, this is I, right? This is nothing but the same code as before. It's going to print exactly the same thing. So whatever this value is, this variable is right next to for, that is the variable we are defining. It can be anything. So here we iterated over text. Now let me show you how to iterate over a list. So let's actually define, for example, alpha. That's a pretty, let's just say a equals to, let's define a whole bunch of actually characters. So a equals to a, b, c. So I just defined a list called a. Now let's iterate through this list. So again, pretty much the same thing. For we can just give any name for our variable. Again, for I can use for I in, but if you oftentimes you want to use something that makes sense. So let's just say for alphabet in a. Okay, this is nothing but I just defined a variable alphabet in this list a, print. Okay, what do we want to print? Current alphabet is, this is nothing but alphabet, right? So this is it. So when I run this, then it goes through each element in here, and now it's saying current alphabet is a, and then it goes to the next one, it goes to the next, and it goes to the next, and so on. So this is how you use for, and we have already looked at the for loop before when we printed out, when we did the math on lists. Now, sometimes you need to exit out of the loop for if some condition is actually met. So for that, we can actually use something called break. B-R-E-A-K, and you can use that both in while loops and also in for loops. For example, let's go back to in fact, let's go back to this side in the text editor again, because it's easy for us to edit the text right here. So let's go back and type or for what was we were using for letter in I love Python. For letter in I love Python. Why is it yelling at me? Okay, so for letter in I love Python, let's say if letter equals to let's say P, okay, the letter P in Python. If letter equals to P, I mean, basically, I'm actually putting a condition of if within the for loop. So for letter in I love Python, so it's going through I space L O V E space P, and if letter equals to P, I want this to break. Okay. Otherwise, print same thing. Current letter is let's say space and letter, and let's go ahead and execute this code, and when we do that, you should see it actually stopped at P right there. Okay, so it goes through I love and then the letter P, it actually stopped it here. So this is again a break. There are a few other things that you can actually do within the loops, and same thing. Let's actually do this for a while loop. You know, while we are looking at this example, again, let's do a equals to 10, and while a is greater than 10, let's actually do while a is greater than 0. I mean, because let's count down from 10. So far we've been looking at count is count plus 1, or centigrade is centigrade plus 5. We can also go back the other way, minus. Yeah. So let's actually say while a is greater than 0, it should have given me a tab. Yeah. Let me go back. I want to print current value is okay, and what variable did we use? A. And now when we print this, I want to now go from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7. So a equals a minus 1, or we can actually write this as a minus equals to 1. Okay, so now if I mean it goes all the way down. So if we actually run this, let's go ahead and run this. It actually goes from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Now let's say let's give a break at let's say 5. So we can say if a equal to 5, and again logical operator, so two equal signs. If a is 5, then break. That's it. So let's run this code again. So it goes from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and it actually stops. So break is basically exit out of this. You know, if a special condition is actually met. So this is like we saw before, I mean, there is we used if right here. You can actually use if and else statements inside any of your loops. So another example we can think of is, let's actually go ahead and print all the odd and even numbers between 0 to 10. So again, for num in oh, by the way, actually, let's do this. For num in range, I'm not sure if I talked about range before, so let's just do that. For num in range 10 to 20. What is range? If I actually go to the right-hand side, take a second to talk about range. Range is nothing but, if you say range 10 to 20, 10 to 20, it's going to, well, it's not printing out. Let's print the numbers in a minute. 10 to 20 means it actually goes from 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, you know, it increments by an integer. So to actually have a look at that, let's just say for I in range 10 to 20, let's remember we need to put this. By the way, I don't need tab. I mean, I don't need to enter. I can actually continue writing the code right here, print I. Okay, so hopefully it should print like 10 to 20, 10 to 19. It's not including 20 right there. So this is basically what range is. So we can actually define range. If you just say range 10, for I in range 10, it's going to just go from 0 to 9. Okay, if we say range 10 to let's say 10 to 50 comma 2, it actually skips well, why did I do this? 10 to 50 comma 2, it actually skips every 2, and you can see now it's only printing all the even numbers. It skips by 2. So range is nothing but it generates a range of integers given the type of condition, starting, ending, and what is the interval that you want to jump through. So anyway, so let's get back to our code here. So for num in range 10 to 20, meaning 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, right? So for this, what do we want to do? If num is divisible by 2, how do we say if number is even? So if num by 2 equals to 0, this is nothing but when you divide this number by 2, if your remainder is 0, which is nothing but if it is an even number, then print, remember we did our placeholders before, print this is an even number, okay? And let's give a space. Well, let's end this, and we need to define what this placeholder is. This placeholder is nothing but num. Okay, so this is all I'm doing is if it's an even number, if when you divide this number by 2 and if the remainder is 0, then print that this number is an even number. And how did instead of just typing num here, I just put %d, which is nothing but an integer placeholder. And what is that integer? It's num here. Okay, so now I want to say else, okay, print it's an odd number. That's pretty much it. So you can put if and else statements inside here. So let's go ahead and run this. Now you can see 10 is an even number, 11 is an odd, 12 is an even number. So it's actually going from 10, 11, 12, and it's checking this if statement. If it is true, it's going to print this. If it's not true, then it's going to go to else, and it's going to print the next one. Okay, so this hopefully explains the basic loops here, like while and for, and also how you can use if and else inside these loops. And in future, this will come very handy. And each of this topic, again, everything I'm just spending about 15 minutes or so on average per video. Each of this can easily be a couple of hours, topic by itself. The whole goal of these videos is to give you enough introduction so you understand exactly what's going on and you can look up more information online. So that's the whole point of these videos. And in the next video, let's continue with a different topic. Thank you very much.